I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 257 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. And today I'm sharing 3 tech tools that helped me stop nagging. Now, before you think that a complete miracle has occurred in this household, I will tell you, I probably still get accused of nagging from time to time, or maybe more often than that. But I realized over the last year or two that there were a fair number of times that I was asking for updates on things or checking in with my kids or my husband about, sort of the hustle and bustle of life in our household that really could be eliminated with better use of technology. And let's face it, if we are going to be the generation that bears the brunt of the scars of this kind of smartphone experiment that we're all engaged in, the constant scrolling, the never being offline, the social media comparative trap, like if we're going to bear the brunt of all of that, then I think we probably should get to reap some of the rewards as well. And one really massive blessing of our tech era are the creation of some of these apps that are designed to resolve our everyday problems. And these are a few of the problems that, I was wrestling with that you might be as well. One was, getting your kids off their phone. And I don't know, maybe to bed like at a reasonable hour or out of bed at a reasonable hour without laying there scrolling through social media or playing some type of game for the 400th time. So just the ability to get your children off their phones is one thing I know I'm hearing about. A second one would be knowing where your kids are supposed to be from day to day, hour to hour, like hello, crazy schedules, right? We are running all over the place to keep these children engaged in offline activities. So the rehearsals, the practices, the, extra educational events that we have them in, all of the things that are happening in the evenings and on the weekends, right? And then thirdly, knowing that they're actually there, like they actually are where they are supposed to be safely and on time. I think these were 3 frequent problems that I felt like I was running into as a parent. So today I'm going to share with you my big 3, the 3 apps or pieces of technology. I think one of these is not actually an app that really are giving me life right now. They are really supporting me as a parent, and I think in many ways supporting my family as well. And so I'm going to share them with you today because when I started talking about them with some of the women in our coaching community, I realized that not everybody knew about these or was using them. And in fact, that was me not that long ago. So I'm just going to pay it forward to you as a podcast listener today. Okay. So the first one here, I'm actually a little embarrassed by how long it took me to find this one. I think this has been around for a good long while, and that is Screentime. So I'll just state this. We, in this household, we are Apple users. The kids have iPhones. I work on a MacBook. We've got a couple iPads in the mix. We're really a Mac family. And so most of the technology that I am familiar with is going to be the version of things that work on an Apple product. And in some cases, I know that these translate to other operating systems. And so I know there is an Android version of Screentime, but what I am talking about in this episode is the one that works on an iPhone. So this is essentially, Screentime is essentially a remote, power disable function for your children's phones and also for your own. And it solves the problem of, how am I going to spend less time on this device, right? What am I going to do to support the habit change of spending less time on the device? And so there's 2 components of Screentime that I want to talk about in this episode. The first one is called downtime. And downtime essentially disables the phone from a certain time in the evening until a certain time in the morning. Or I guess theoretically, it could be any piece of the day, right? Wherever you want to specifically disable the phone, you can add this limit remotely from your phone onto your children's phones. Now, I want to just have a note on this. This requires that you've added your children to your family so that their accounts show up. So within like the Apple ecosystem, you can add your children, most of you will know this, to your family. And then you have a level of control, basically, so you can pay for their accounts, but it also gives you access to some of these other tools. So once you get into Screentime, which is, I'm going to link in the show notes, like the keystroke guidance here, or like the actual, I'll link to the actual Apple page that tells you how to do this, because we're not going to have a tech class here. But basically, under settings on your phone, there is a Screentime link. And when you go there, you're going to see this particular section of it called downtime. And downtime allows you to choose the time every day that the phone just shuts itself off, and then what time it turns back on. And so I think, honestly, this one is healthy for us as well. And it does allow certain apps to work no matter what. So for example, you might be thinking, what do I do about getting my texts? If my children are still out past that time or whatever, you can have certain apps bypass the downtime where it will work anyhow. But we're really talking about the things that you're tempted to kind of lose yourself in, that we want it to be disabled. So the downtime function allows you to essentially create a remote power off button for the phone. And so, what happens in my household is the kids kind of come in around the time that the phone has shut off, and they just sort of toss this useless, hunk of metal on the bed or wherever they are, because it doesn't work anymore. Like at that point at night, it's not useful to them because they can't engage with it in the way that they were. So it creates some support around helping them get their backpack together and get ready for the next day and get themselves to bed, because they don't have the temptation of being on the device. By the way, same thing in the morning. If you're struggling with how do I get them out of bed, ready, and out the door, if the phone doesn't turn on until the time when they're supposed to be out the door, then it doesn't create a temptation, right? It doesn't kind of pull them away from the tasks that they're doing during that hour of the morning. So that is a hot tip. And then the second piece of Screentime is app limits. Okay. So within the hours that the phone is still functioning, let's say hypothetically that's from 7 a.m. till like 9:30 p.m. Within that hour, you can put limits on their access to certain apps. So Apple will actually, once the kids are linked up, it will track everyone's usage. And you can go kind of look at the history and see, okay, like what's the activity for any individual user? Which app did they use the most often? How much time did they spend in the last week on that app? And that can give you some guidance around which things you might want to limit, right? So let's say that you have a teenager and they're using YouTube and TikTok a lot, right? You can say that within a given day, they can have a maximum amount of time on that collection of apps that are kind of like the ones that could get a little out of hand, right? And here's a mistake I made is my children have to use their devices in school. So like my older two have MacBook laptops that they have in school with them, and that is linked into this account. So if you put overall like all app limits, then it actually will shut down during their school day. And that is not what you're looking to do. So using this specific kind of app by app limit really helps you get to a place where you're picking like the biggest culprits for that child. And, you have a younger child, it might be something like a game that they're playing a lot. And you want to say they can't use that game more than a certain amount of time per day. So you get to decide together, what do you find reasonable? And then again, it will remotely disable their phone at that point, and they can remotely request additional screen time. And you can authorize that like in increments temporarily, or you can say no, right? It's kind of depending on what's going on for that day. It's also a great way to check yourself. on some of the biggest challenges that you might have with limiting technology. So putting a limit on yourself that you can override if you need to, but that gives you that reminder that you've kind of bumped up against that limit is just really helpful. So again, primary focus of this episode is how do you get this to help you stop nagging? And I think saying to them, like, put your phone down, go find something else to do. Do you still have that phone on? Are you ready for school yet? Like all of those nagging comments can really dialed way down if we have some automation behind that and some support. Okay, so that's the first one I have for you today. Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. Second in my big 3 is Apple Calendar, which I still refer to as iCal, like I'm an old lady, and my kids yell at me about this all the time. So the calendar function that is built right into the phone, right into the iPhone is the calendar app that I prefer to use. I use it on my MacBook. I use it on my phone. This I'm sure would work in Google Calendar or other digital calendar tools. But again, I'm going to share the ones that I use, take it or leave it, figure out how to modify it, for whatever platform you're on. But in Apple Calendar, I want to tell you what I've done and how just wonderful it has been. I have a calendar, essentially a layer for each child. So in Google Calendar, and again, I'll link the directions for how to do this. When you open your calendars, you'll see a button that says Add Calendar. And at that point, you can create a calendar that's like a separate layer. And then it can be toggled on or toggled off inside of the calendar app. And so I have one for each child. I have one for myself. My husband has one. Everybody has their own layer. And then they're all shared with each other. So my calendar, actually, the kids are not shared with each other because it's just not necessary. But so like my oldest daughter's is shared with me and my husband and her. And then same thing for each of the kids. So because my husband and I subscribe to all of them, right, all the calendars, and we can then see like a sum total of where is everybody supposed to be this week, and it's color coded. So each child has their own color on the calendar so that when I look at that interface and I'm looking at like a week at a time, I see these blocks that are colored by child. So if any of you are in workplaces that you'd shared calendars, you'll see this, right? You often can see your colleagues' calendars in the same way. Okay, here's where it became really exciting. As the kids got a little bit older and and they all got phones, which they didn't have, right? When we started this system, we added them to their own calendars. So now when we're talking about planning for homework or planning the week or talking about carpools, they have visibility to, okay, I have volleyball practice on Tuesday and so-and-so's mom is bringing me home, right? Or I have rehearsal for the play until this time on Wednesday, and I know that I have a tight turnaround between that and the rehearsal for showcase. So, I can start to see that there's not a lot of time for homework on that night. Like that ability for them to see their own calendar and for my husband and I to see it really keeps everybody on the same page. And then I can add details to these calendar events, like the specific location, right, of the game or wherever they need to be taken at that time. And maybe some notes that are specific that I need the child to see. And so there's this communication that doesn't have to happen by phone call or by text because it's happening within the calendar. So when they say to me now, as we're sitting down, to do homework or something, when do I have practice this week? I'm like, let's open that calendar. And it's reinforcing for them that they have visibility to it. And then they're starting to add events to the calendar as well, which immediately show up with visibility for my husband and I. So one critical feature of this that I love is the ability to toggle these off. So you can turn them on and see everything, which candidly gets a little overwhelming, right? Or you can turn them off when you're trying to like work within a given day and just look at your own schedule. And then when I'm doing planning where I'm trying to get everybody's transportation needs met or whatever, I can kind of look at the full set of calendars. So if you're still using like a wall calendar or you're using a dry erase calendar, like I think this is the system that's definitely worth looking at because it lends itself so well to like repeating appointments and shared visibility for everybody, to be able to see at the same time. So that's Apple Calendar. And again, I am sure the same concept would work in another digital calendar, but that is the one that I am, really, that's the one I use. Okay. And then the third, bringing up the rear here in my big three, and these are probably not in order, but the third one I want to share is an app called Life 360. So this app is essentially GPS tracking for your family. It links to their phones. So I will say, like, my youngest daughter didn't have a phone until very recently. So it does not work when they only have Wi-Fi enabled devices, if they have to have phone service for this to work. But once they have that and they're carting a phone around with them, then it will show you their specific location on a map. Okay, so you can see where, and that's one of many things that this does. I'm just getting started here. But so one of the things I learned, we were at like an amusement park. That's Kings Island is here in Cincinnati. And you want to give the younger kids a little more freedom to be able to kind of walk around without you right on top of them. Well, this GPS is specific enough that you can see like where in the park they are. And if your kids have Snapchat, this works very similarly to like SnapMap. So if you are, okay, we are going to be at this particular part of the park and they say, okay, I'm going to go over to this ride, and you can see they're still in line at that ride, right? And then when they start to walk back, like you can see where they're coming back. So that visibility of giving them a little more room to maneuver, like at the mall or at an amusement park, I think is really helpful for younger kids because you still kind of have a good sense of where they are. The second thing this does is if the child isn't where they said they would be, you know about it, right? So as the kids get a little older and you're building that accountability and honesty into, I said I was going to this friend's house and that's where your phone location better say you are, right? It also tells you when they arrived home. So it's kind of automated curfew management. Like my parents would have loved this, right? When I was growing up, because inside the app, when you open it, it tells you the person's current location and what time they arrived there. So even if you had fallen asleep or even if there's really no way around this. Like my phone got home at this time and it's been there ever since. So that is like another piece of functionality, is that it tells you when they arrived at a particular destination, including a destination that is not your home, right? Like they're at a sleepover. What time did they get there? And it also tells you their battery life. So if the battery on their phone, it tells you what the battery percentage is, right? So I'm looking at mine right now. It's like 97%, 100, 99, and 35 for the other 4 people. So when the battery drops to a certain level, it alerts you, hey, this person's battery has dropped to a low level. You might want to ask them to charge it. Okay, why is that helpful? Well, if you're a parent, right? Because if that battery dies and then they say, well, I couldn't call you or I couldn't check in because the battery died, it allows you to make sure that you're able to stay in touch with them if that battery starts to run low, right? And they can't say like, oh, I couldn't call you, the battery died, when you can see exactly what the battery percentage is. And I also think it helps avoid those like unnecessary check-ins. Hey, are you still at rehearsal? Well, you can see that they're still at rehearsal, right? Or what time will that volleyball away game bus be back to the school? You can see that they're on a bus and it says it's 17 minutes away from, where you are. And so you kind of know, right? You don't have to be checking in with them. Again, reducing nagging, right? I think it helps with collaboration among parents. I'm not texting my husband, did you remember to go get so-and-so? Because I can see that their car, that they are there, that they're on their way en route to get that child or that they're already in the parking lot. And then there's some really interesting extra features if you have drivers. So if your children are old enough to drive, which I think really is when this app becomes like a must have is it'll track things like what was the maximum speed that they were driving? Were there incidents of hard braking or rapid acceleration or phone usage? So there's a lot of like tools that are really safety driven that are available inside of this app. And honestly, I think it could be great for aging parents as well. We have a lot of people in our community who are helping to care for and support aging parents, and knowing where they are and knowing that they got to where they were going can be a real reassurance. So I think that's another functionality, is you could easily link in other adults to your Life 360 circle. So I think, my purpose in sharing all of this today is that we so often lament what technology has taken from us, and how hard it has made some aspects of life. And it really has. And I think the idea is we want to control the technology and not have it control us. So these 3 apps really have enhanced my ability to manage a family with 3 tweens and teens and co-parent, through that experience. And they've really saved time. I think they drive peace of mind for me often, and they help to support habit change in some cases, both for myself and for the kids, to teach them skills like how to manage their calendar and know where they need to be, or how to manage, their own use of their device so that it doesn't take over their life. I am also confident that you have other ideas that are supporting you, that you love, and you're like, how did she not mention this one? And I want to hear about them, because I am still definitely learning about all the tools that are out there. So if you have ideas that are really helping you, then I want you to share them back with me. And you can do that in 2 places. You can DM me at cschoolnikki on Instagram. I love it when you guys do that. Or you can share your ideas in our Facebook group, which, if you go into Facebook groups, is called Brilliant Balance. And we can crowdsource some of these ideas that I'm sure you all have and can bring to the table and share them back out with the balance of the community. So thanks for listening today. That's all for this time. Till next time, my friends, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.